Welcome to Survey and Beyond, the data collection podcast by Survey CTO. We share expert insights and practical tips on data collection and analysis, discuss innovative methods and tools to enhance data quality and security, and demystify complex data concepts to help people collecting data all around the world. I'm your host, Marta Costa. Joining us today is Andrew Gerhardt, the Senior Digital Data Collection Manager at Loop Horizon, a consulting and technology company specializing in helping brands optimize their customer experiences through effective use of data, intelligence, and marketing technology. With over 14 years of experience in digital data collection and analytics, Andrew has become a respected authority in setting up robust data collection frameworks and training teams to extract maximum value from their data. Throughout his career, Andrew has worked with major organizations like Sky and Investec, where he led significant initiatives in transitioning to Adobe Analytics and setting data collection standards. His work focuses on ensuring that the foundations of data collection are strong, accurate, and well-governed, paving the way for effective analysis and decision-making. Currently, at Loop Horizon, Andrew helps global brands, particularly in the e-commerce space, address challenges of integrating fragmented and offline data to create a cohesive single customer view. His insights into the practical challenges of data integration, privacy compliance, and the technical nuances of using tools like Adobe Experience Cloud provide a valuable perspective on navigating today's complex data landscape. Andrew's expertise is all about maximizing the potential of collected data to create meaningful, actionable insights. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you, Marta, for inviting me onto this podcast. It was a brilliant introduction and just made me smile.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm glad. And I would love to kick off the conversation exploring your personal journey into digital analytics. So, do you still remember what initially drew you to this world?
I'm very much like most of the other founders in digital analytics where you just kind of fell into this. When I graduated from university, I graduated with a computer science degree and always had an affinity for math in school. I came to London and did not have a job at the time and was looking for one. And a headhunter asked me about, would you like to explore web analytics? My very first interview was with Rob Jackson, who was the founder of Conversion Thursday at the time. And that's when I found out about digital analytics and started going to Web Analytics Wednesday, which thankfully, that's how I found my very first job.
That's amazing. Well, thank you for sharing. And since your first job until today, your current role, so how has your passion evolved and what is driving you now?
I think the thing that drives me now is how do you take the next step, but in a compliant way? When I first started off, GDPR was not really a thing. You had some compliances, but nothing that actually made you really stop and think about, well, should I be capturing this? It was more around what were your own company's policies at the time. The thing that drives me forward now is looking at how will things like server side help out and how can people get better at optimizing the journey, especially through personalization and more effective optimization.
Wonderful. Would you be able to explain to our listeners what type of projects do you typically work on?
Most of the projects I work on are going to be more of a strategic role, especially looking after our more global clients. One of the main focuses I will be looking at will be how do we take their new requests and fit into the current schemas, ensuring that it matches with our own governance and expectations from not only us as a agency, but also as a client and what they are looking at trying to get in their data analysis, but also from an implementation point of view. I would say that My projects I'm working on right now are going to be more on the BAU side because we're waiting for the next big project with one of our clients.
Thank you. Would you be able to share a specific moment or a specific project that shaped your perspective, specifically on the relationship between data quality and decision making?
The one that always stood out to me the most was there was a very large project that we were doing at Sky where it was a 1 year in the making. They took a large section of the developers and the project owners and business analysts and said, "We want you to work on this one project." And it was going to revolutionize how the customers were engaging with the digital state. And in that 1 year, I worked with every part of the business to understand what do they want, work with every part of the developers from the account management and the sales, and came up with a strategy for how this was going to work. And I will always remember on lunch day, I got an email saying, "Hey, this is now live. Can we see how the campaign's working?" And I went back. I was like, "Yeah, no problem. Just send me. What was the campaign code you guys use?" And they're like, "What's the campaign code?" And I was like, "Oh no." So what happened was the marketing team got so excited they forgot that we needed to have some way of tracking these new experiences because they did an A/B test. They wanted to see how many people would come from a friendly URL versus those who came from this very specific mechanism that they gave them to come in. So I was able to at least get the friendly URL updated, but this device that they sent out, there was no way of updating that. They were just direct traffic and there was nothing that we could do about it. So for me, it was always looking at, even though you think that you have touched every part of the business, always do a double check and think about, is there that one more that could have made that project a success? And for me, that one more was I should have reached out to the marketers to make sure I knew how they were going to be communicating this to make sure everything was run smoothly.
That's a great insight, I think, especially for people that work with customers or clients or anyone that or solving problems in general. I would say sometimes we just need to uh, know which questions to ask, and not try to solve the problem that they are stating, but actually trying to go into the roots and asking more questions and double checking everything.
I agree. It's also about also knowing what's the right question to ask at the right time because I could have asked them 2 months before release day, but they weren't even thinking about that probably until 3 weeks before they were actually planning going live.
Well, I'm sure with practice, everyone becomes better at knowing what questions to ask at the right time. Hopefully, and given your experience, your wide-ranging experience, you have worked in the finance sector, e-commerce, right now, even telecommunications. Would you be able to talk about how different industries collect, process, and you even use the data?
Whenever I was leaving Sky, one of the things that drew to me to Investec was that it was a financial because it was one of the few sectors that I never got into. And I was thinking that it was going to be completely different. But honestly, the way that they use data and how they interpret it really wasn't that much difference. And that's the one thing I've noticed. It doesn't matter so much the sector that you're in, but the type of people that you are working with. The people themselves will determine how they would interpret data and how much they want to use. You're always going to have some people who will question, why is this data off by 5% versus those who will go, you know what, actually, that matches with what I was thinking for, or, oh, that was interesting, even though you're only have a confidence level probably closer to 70%. If I was to say the one thing that was really different about the process was at Sky, things moved quick. And Investec, things moved a little bit slower. And that was because they had a lot more regulations and they had to think a lot more around what would this impact be, not just from a corporate point of view, but from a financial regulations.
Would you say that the different pace in these different industries affect the quality of data in any way?
It definitely has some impact because in a more fast pace, there's always going to be more room for things to go wrong. But at the same time, I actually think that's actually a better thing because You can always have the opportunity to learn fast, fail fast, and rectify it fast. If you made a mistake in a financial industry, it could take months before you're able to fix it. While on a more e-commerce, we can see a mistake and we can actually rectify that same mistake within a few hours.
Would you be able to share any specific strategies in place that works well in these high-paced environments, not to compromise the quality of data in any way?
I think one of the things that really benefited us is that we have a terminology that my manager came up with called division of labor. The division of labor is where we clearly define what are the roles and responsibilities between the developers and us as analysts. For the developers, they're responsible for ensuring that the data is going onto the data layer in a accurate way so that we can consistently get the same results. For us, it's our responsibility for being able to take that data from the data layer and format it to match with what the expectations are from Adobe, because that's where most of the issues will come from. The developers trying to figure out how do you format this in a way that is compliant with your digital analytics tool. From there, we know who is responsible for what. Now, to also help set expectations, we have we're following a lot more of the developer strategy of having clear sprints. So we work with the business to understand what are the priorities now, and we set aside X amount of days to work on it in that sprint. And we always say we will develop for the first 3/4, but the last 1/4 of that sprint is going to be dedicated for QA and testing. And if any of them tests fail during that QA, we remove it from the release to ensure that we are only releasing accurate data.
Going a bit deeper into data quality, which is a key concern for us, would you say, is it feasible for you to share what are the aspects of data quality that cannot be compromised, especially during the data collection phase?
This is one that I've been thinking about for a while. And for me, the biggest no go for me has always been if we can confirm that it is not accurate at the time of release. Even if it's one of those rare instances where you go, you know what, this is only happening about 20% of the time. The fact that it's happening 20% of the time in our own testing, once you release that to the masses, it's automatically going to exponentially get larger because there's going to be a lot more opportunity for these bugs to in the data collection to come into light. So for me, it's always going to be if you're testing it and you can confirm that it's failing, even if the developers do not understand, it shouldn't be released. You need to take a step back and understand why it's happening so that way you can ensure more accurate data as you do go live.
I'm going to ask you this because a lot of our listeners might not be in the same industry as you. A lot of our listeners are from international development. They're working for NGOs and other international organizations. So they have slightly different processes as you in terms of collecting and processing data. So would you be able just to expand a bit more the what you mean about the testing phase that you conduct before releasing?
So when it comes to the testing phase, is an opportunity for us to be able to check and validate that everything is working. So we would focus on one of the tickets and we'll go in and we will test that one specific scenario and we'll go from start to finish. So if we were looking at a conversion funnel and we made a change that was going to be when you click on this button that this product was going to be added and we would have this element of information being passed in, we would go through and we would test each of the buttons that causes that ad and see, do we get the value coming back? We would check to see, are we getting the expected value coming back? And then once we can document this and take the screen grabs and the validations to ensure that everything is working as expected, we would always have one more step in that phase where we would go to the client and say, okay, we're doing a release tomorrow. Here is everything that we're releasing. And now we're going to do the exact same steps with you again so that you can see that is working and that you have confidence to go back to the business and say, yes, this is working. You can now start using this data from this point.
Perfect. And I think this resonates with a lot of people, um, even if our listeners are not in the same industry or using the same processes. I think this resonates with everyone in the sense that it's always good to test before conducting any kind of data collection. Um, would you be able just to be not abstract and just to give real life examples, because you are talking about releasing a product, testing. Would you be able just to give some examples on products that you have been involved in the release and how the data is collected?
I could give it some in depth. So while I was at Investec, I was responsible for the release of tools like Adobe Analytics, some marketing tags like Google Floodlights, Google Ads, social media pixels. So this could have been your Twitter, your LinkedIn, and session replay tools. So this was going to be decibel insight. So understanding how you can visibly see what's happening on your site. So you always have like the Adobe Analytics data that's telling you what's happened, but being able to see why it's happening, that gave a lot more power. And then we also had a personalization tool. So this would have been things like Decibel Insight and Adobe Target. Nowadays, I'm spread out on a lot more wider tools. So a lot more of the marketing pixels that are needed to be able to do remarketing or tracking how ads are being performed, and doing more on Google Analytics 4. Now that Google Analytics Universal Analytics is fully sunset.
I would really love now to discuss your experience with single customer view. Before starting this discussion, can you define these concepts and explain what it entails in general?
For me, single customer view is around being able to get a clearer picture about who are your clients, your customers, or your potential prospects that could become customers. This would entail being able to try to bring in as much of the data set as possible. So, does the company know about them? But also, what do you know about them in a digital world? Because not every time, it doesn't always match what you have in the offline with what people are doing online. So it's taking all the signals and being able to understand what does the customer want, sometimes even before they even know that they want it.
So that means that you are using data from different sources and different types of data. Is that right?
Yes. So whenever I was doing this, we did this at Sky, and I'm comfortable talking about it because we've already talked about this at the Adobe Summit while I was there, where we were taking information that Sky knew about it and uploaded into Adobe's Experience Cloud that was linking to their Experience Cloud ID, which was linked to their customer ID, which we captured when you landed on the site, and enrich the data with what Sky knew about this customer. Then we were able then to take algorithmic data of what do we want that customer's experience to be like. That could be based off of what potential new upgrades it could have, or how can they get more out of their Sky package, to even doing personalization based off of the exact day and time that they were on the site.
Was there, so out of curiosity, do you also use offline data, not only online data, into creating this single customer view?
In Adobe, we did use some of the offline data, and this was used mostly for personalization, not as much for analysis. For analysis, we rather do that in a more offline nature. With that, we would take the Adobe data, export it, and get it formatted in a way where it could be used by the analyst. I never really got involved much into that because Sky has an entire army of analysts that were far much better at SQL than I ever was. So we rather looked at how can we power this engine more to ensure that they can have more data to understand more around what does the customer needs and desires are.
And what would you say is the importance of user IDs in that system specifically?
The user ID is the most critical identification that you capture because it's the only way of being able to link what was happening online with the offline. There are other concepts where you can have a better idea of who these people are, such as having a unique identifier when they click on an email that you pass in that you know, okay, it's this particular customer. And there's potential of doing fingerprinting. But the only way that you can get 100% accurate that this is this person is by having some type of customer ID that you can have a one-to-one link between the digital world with the offline CRM world.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And again, just to speak with listeners from other industries, I think this resonates a lot in the sense that any person collecting data, longitudinal data specifically, where you are tracking data over time for a specific subject, um, a unique ID is usually the key aspect to merge that data and to be able to have uh, insights, good insights. What would you say um, are some best practices to or lessons learned from your experience with single customer view?
Probably the biggest experience that I had was definitely at Sky, where it was how can you take this digital data and make it useful for the analysts? Looking at if anyone's ever looked at the Adobe data, especially from the daily feeds, it is a massive data set. There is hundreds and hundreds of columns, and every server call is a new row. And we've tried twice trying to take this data, export it, and make it where the analyst can use it. And both of the projects failed. And that's because it is difficult to use. My biggest key for success is partner with a company that can do this. So at Sky, we partnered with a company that was able to take the data and transform it into three tables. And you knew that one table was for a session, one table was at more of hit level and was a visitor. And I think that made it more successful because it became a lot more, well, here is the question that was asked, here is the answer. And it became a lot easier for them to use. So I would definitely recommend it doesn't matter how much money or how many people or how great you think they are at being able to do this. Don't try to recreate the wheel. Partner with someone so that way you can actually start getting value from it immediately.
Great advice. And besides partnering with someone, are there any other things that companies should keep in mind if they want to build a single customer view?
Honestly, that was probably the biggest lesson that we learned because, as I mentioned, I didn't get much involved in the actual using of the data because there was an entire army behind that. My main focus was ensuring that the documentation was up to scratch so that way when the analysts start using it, they understood what does the data mean. You also need to make sure that this is put in an essential place to ensure that they have easy access to it and that it's always updated. I know that is probably the biggest bugbear for most people in digital because you're always moving faster and you're not updating the documentation. But that documentation is very critical for the analysts who are trying to use it.
Going back to the data quality and data accuracy topic uh, that we were speaking earlier, you mentioned that there is some sort of threshold when you are testing before the release to make sure you have accurate data. But I would imagine that still you would get imperfect data after collecting it. Do you have any specific methods or tools or approaches for people that are using these imperfect data? How they can convert this imperfect data into actionable insights?
One of the things I always look at is it may not be perfect data, but it doesn't mean it's not usable data. I always like to think back to there was something in London that you could get. It's called the Odd Box. It's a box of fruit or vegetables where it wasn't looking perfect, so they couldn't sell it in stores. But you know what? It still tastes fine. You just need to know how do you trim it a little bit so you can start using it. Even though the data may not be perfect, if it is precise data, you know precisely how imperfect it is and you know how to shift it so that way you can actually start using it in a way. The business doesn't care if it's not completely perfect. What they care about is can you take it and turn it into a story? If you could turn it into a story and you can leverage it to help them drive insight, you can let them know it's not perfect, that you know that there is some imperfection, but you did this methodology that will help move it. And for me, that's how I look at it. I understand why it's not perfect. And now I know how to take that data and use it so that it can be used and not just be throw it away and say, oops, sorry, nothing I can do about it.
And do you have any techniques on how you get to understand why the data is imperfect and how to convert it into a good story?
There is no silver bullet for this one. I hate to say it. It's a lot of tiring, going in, seeing how the data is being collected, understanding all those little nuances. And those nuances just get wider and wider. I mean, you have iOS 17, which keeps data from going in. You have ad blockers that cause things. I've ran a test 50 times in a row and see that 45% of the time, 45 of those times, it worked perfect. In those 5 times, you just got some odd results. There was no way of explaining why those odd results happened. The data, the code was all done perfectly. It's just the internet isn't perfect. It doesn't always work the way that you expect.
And another topic that I would love also to explore with you is data privacy. You mentioned earlier about GDPR, which was something that didn't exist when you started working. And obviously, this is key. Data protection principles are quite important nowadays. And you are in a field that is collecting a lot of data and personable data as well. How can companies ensure that they respect privacy, but still delivering these tailored experiences, this personalization that you have been talking about?
First, it's always worthwhile to always honor and respect the client's wishes. So we use a cookie cassette to come up with it and ask them, can you give us permission to do this? One of the benefits I've always seen is if you're more upfront and you're honest on exactly what it's being used for, that they will be more open to give you consent to enable data collection or personalization. If you mention that by enabling this personalization, that you're not talking about marketing personalization, but you're trying to make sure that they have a much better experience on the site, then you have a lot more opportunity to get that consent. But even if you don't get that consent, there is a lot more opportunities that you can do by doing more of the server side where you're not really using information about that particular customer, but what they are on right then and there. If you know that they're on page that is talking around sports and that based off of lookalike behavior of your hundreds and thousands of other customers, that people who land on that sports page will end up going on and doing XYZ later on. You can help personalize it to help direct them down that path that gives you the success that you want. So that way you're not doing any personalization based off of who they are, but just the fact that they landed on that page.
Thank you for sharing that. Before we end the interview, I would love to have some actionable insights and recommendations from you. So, do you have any advice to offer to other professionals in the field?
Anyone else that is getting into digital analytics, I would recommend always follow experts. Even though I have been in the industry for a while, I know enough that I can always learn more. So whenever it comes to Google Analytics, I follow organizations like Analytics Mania or Simo Ava, who are doing great work on understanding on how to get the most out of it. When it comes to Adobe Analytics, I follow people like Frederick Werner, or I go on to the Adobe Analytics rock stars or the Adobe Analytics champions. So they just announced recently this week, here are your new analytical champions. And these are people who are pushing the boundaries of what is possible. I'm also following on podcasts. So there's the Analytics Power Hour and the Data Chief, where I'm looking at how other people are using it. Um, just a very small plug. I'm also doing a podcast as well called the Digital After Dark, where we're talking around all things digital. And even then, we're talking with other experts. So we're learning while we're doing the podcast. But most importantly, you have to network. You have to go out there and meet the other people. It's a very small community, and we're very much in the mind of we want to openly help other people. So go to things like Measure Camp, which is a great opportunity to meet people who are very dedicated. Because let's be honest, not all of us will give up a Saturday to go and actually network about what we do for a living.
Thank you. Great advice. And besides all those podcasts and connecting with others, do you have any specific resource like a book or guidelines that you would like to share?
When it comes to books, probably the one book that I am constantly going back to was the Adobe Site Catalyst Handbook written by Adam Greco. It is severely outdated. But even though it's outdated, a lot of the technology behind it is still relevant today. So while you can't look at it from a exact step by step, it gives you an idea how does the process in the background work. That way you are getting more of an understanding of how and why this data is formatted in the way that it is. So it was great to see like one of the probably the biggest bugbears in Adobe Analytics is the product string and seeing why is the product string done the way it is. So that way you can at least grumble a little bit less whenever you're having to do it next time.
Thank you. And thank you, Andrew, for sharing your journey and sharing your perspective and insights. It was a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Marta, for allowing me to come on and get to talk a little bit about my own insights and help give back to the community.
Survey and Beyond, the data collection podcast, is brought to you by Survey CTO. To find out more about Survey CTO and how it ensures reliable, secure, and scalable data collection, visit www.surveycto.com. And make sure to search for Survey and Beyond the Data Collection podcast in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Survey CTO, thanks for listening.
When it comes to books, probably the one book that I am constantly going back to was the Adobe Site Catalyst Handbook written by Adam Greco. It is severely outdated. But even though it's outdated, a lot of the technology behind it is still relevant today. So while you can't look at it from a exact step by step, it gives you an idea how does the process in the background work. That way you are getting more of an understanding of how and why this data is formatted in the way that it is. So it was great to see, like, one of the probably the biggest bugbears in Adobe Analytics is the product string, and seeing why is the product string done the way it is. So that way you can at least grumble a little bit less whenever you're having to do it next time. Thank you, Marta, for allowing me to come on and get to talk a little bit about my own insights and help give back to the community.